In this video, I'm going to share with you how to guarantee that the law of assumption works for you. If you've been trying to implement the power of this law and no matter what you do, nothing actually changes, well, the good news is the law is always working. It's just not working the way you want it to. So I'm going to be using this plant right here to help you understand why that's happening, but more importantly, to help you understand how you can use this to tap into the power of the law of assumption and start to create the life you want and the one you really deserve. So let's dive in. So for this example, this plant right here is going to represent your current assumption. It is expressing out into your circumstances, and it's planted or rooted in this vessel, this pot, which is your subconscious, right? So the seeds of the assumption were planted in the subconscious, and now they are sprouting out into the tangible world. Now, most people waste a lot of time and a lot of energy when they try to come up with a new assumption, which is going to be represented by this beautiful plant that my girlfriend gave to me that I've been propagating. She taught me how. And this new idea, this new assumption, most people do this. They've got their old assumption and then they put that idea of the new assumption on the old one. They're like, why hasn't it changed? And they're trying so hard, they're imagining, they're visualizing, they're affirming, but you can see that this new assumption has no chance to grow because it's rooted in nothing. It's just an idea. So unless you get to the roots of the old assumption so that you can replace it with the new beautiful assumption that aligns with that desired end state, that experience that you really want to have, it will be the same as this plant just sitting on the other plant. The other plant keeps getting nourishment from the soil of the unconscious, but this new plant has nowhere to go and no way to grow and get nourishment. So now let's break down exactly what an assumption is so you can better understand. And lastly, how you can dig up the old assumption so that you have room, space, and nutrients to plant your new assumption. So to be clear on an assumption, the terms that Neville Goddard gave it are anything that you give permission or consent to be true. An idea that you hold, you give permission for that idea to be true, you give consent to that idea to be true, and realize this is not objectively true to the universe. It's simply how you identify to yourself. So the concept that you hold of yourself is a collection of different assumptions. And those assumptions, the reason this matters so much is because the assumptions, since they're in your subconscious, they make up the lens, look at that, of how you see reality. Now, these assumptions can support the reality that you want to experience, or these assumptions can block the experiences that you're wanting. And these assumptions are so powerful, the way our brain works. Our subconscious goes through between 10 to 50 million bits of information per second. So the assumptions, maybe that's going to be that everyone always leaves you, that you're abandoned, that you never get the connection you need. This was my assumption before I learned how to do all of this, which is I'm going to share with you exactly what I did to break free of this. But the assumption that I held based on past experiences that I went through physically, and I thought, oh, this must be true about me, because you didn't have any other tools or choice to have any other assumption that you formed when you were a kid, most likely between birth and 7 years old. That's when our brain is basically in our assumption collecting mode. And then, even though there was love out in the universe and out in the world, I couldn't see that, right? There was a block here because all I could perceive of was more of what I assumed. Oh, yeah, let me find that person who's emotionally unavailable, and then they'll confirm that no one's emotionally available for me. And maybe for you, that's about money. Maybe it's reflected in money, that no matter how hard I give, no matter how much I work, no matter what I try, there's never enough for me. something comes out and it takes it, some kind of upheaval where it's like a roller coaster. So then all you perceive is of those opportunities, of those people, of those circumstances that will take, and it's not going to be symbiotic. Now, that doesn't mean that you're bad or wrong or that this can't be resolved. But what you've got to understand is the reason that this hasn't been working for you is because this hasn't changed. That original plant is still being in the soil and it hasn't been uprooted. So you keep finding more of the same, even though you're trying to see this hasn't changed. So if I had a blindfold on, and I was trying really, really hard to see you, and no matter what I told myself, no matter what I did, I still can't see you. Well, you're still there, but what I got to do is remove my blocks. And the way to do that is to start to dissolve the old assumption as you start to build the new one up. So here's how to do that. So one of the first things to do is to start breaking out of the automatic application of the old assumption. That's a very long-winded way to say something's going to happen. There's going to be an event that comes up in your life. And this event is going to come up and it's neutral, okay? But you're going to put a reason as to why it happened. That reason's either going to be supportive of the new assumption or it's going to support the old assumption. Now, let me give you two different examples. The first one's going to be relationship because this is how I learned it. So maybe you're going to meet somebody out. Maybe you met and you matched and now you had some good exchanges and now you're going to meet for dinner. And you go to the dinner, you sit down, you're nervous, 10 minutes passes. 20 minutes passes, 30 minutes passes, and they're nowhere to be seen. There's no call, there's no text, there's no kind of contact. And you're like, I knew I shouldn't have got my hopes up. I knew this person wasn't as interested. Just when I start liking somebody else, they always reject me, okay? If you choose to start telling yourself the story or start giving the reason based on the old assumption that you're not good enough, everyone always rejects you, okay, we know that that's coming from the past, right? It's very automatic. So in that same experience, that person could have gotten a flat tire. They could have got a flat tire, and when they got out of their car, it was by the side of the road and there was a big grate and it was kind of raining. And so when they got out to call a tow truck, their phone slipped and it went through the grate. So now they have no way to call. They have no way to move because their tire is flat. And so they are stuck. And eventually, several hours later, somebody comes and helps them. They get a phone, they get their car towed. But they didn't have your number because they didn't have their phone, so they couldn't call you. So they're safe and they go back home. And then maybe they're so embarrassed, they don't know what to do, and so they don't contact you. But in that moment of you sitting there and saying, this person's not showing up. I don't really know what's going on. I'm not going to assume that it's something I lack. We'll see. It's obviously disappointing, but I'm okay. And maybe I'll call a friend. Maybe I'll go for a workout. Maybe I'll go for a walk. How can I take care of myself in this moment with this disappointment and realizing they're not rejecting me outright? I don't know what's going on, and I'm going to soothe myself now and be open to that person contacting me in the future. And if they never do, I know it's not a direct reflection of my worth or my value. So even though these are the same, coming from the same event, there's two entirely different viewpoints, different filters, different assumptions. This response is rooted in the assumption that you're loving, you're whole and complete, you are worthy of love. This is rooted in an assumption that you're not good enough, everyone always rejects you. So starting to be clear on what story are you telling? That's going to help you understand of what assumption that is actually getting nurtured, that is getting a chance to root itself in your subconscious. Now, if you're looking for help in your life right now, I am offering one-on-one work where I will help you one-on-one to break down what is going on and help you shift that feeling state and dissolve those old anchoring limiting beliefs. I am going to include a link below. Fill out the form and I will email you. If the link is still working, the sessions are still available. So check it out if this is resonating. Now, in this, how to do this, especially if you're like me and have a long history or had a long history of rejection, this moment right here is vital. This is where I say you can implement ABC, awareness. Okay, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. I'm starting to want to tell myself the story from the assumption that I'm not good enough. Okay, I'm going to start to breathe, which is part B. I'm going to breathe because my nervous system feels like I'm in danger, that they're going to leave me again. Nope, I'm safe here. I'm going to do a new choice. I'm going to do a somatic movement. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to take the energy and invest it into myself and take care of me in this moment, because this is kind of disappointing and I don't really know what the other person's doing. But every time I break out of this automatic response based on the past, I give that new plant some space to take root in my subconscious mind. Now, this could be the same thing about work, that you go and you apply for a job and you don't hear back. Everything went well. You've had 2 different job, interviews, or 2 different rounds of interviews, and you're not hearing from it. I knew it. I knew that they were not going to pick me. Everyone always gets it above me, as opposed to, I'm building my skills. I don't actually know if I want to work there. Maybe there were some things in the interview process, but giving yourself the autonomy that maybe if somebody doesn't pick you or say yes to you, there's actually a better opportunity in your future. But that takes an ability in the present moment. Be aware of the old assumption. Breathe to regulate your nervous system, to break out of this old assumption and start to make new choices. Every time you make those new choices that align with that assumption, you are being in that embodied version of yourself. So you're not just thinking of it, you're actually feeling from it, because you are that version of yourself. That self-concept aligns with that wish fulfilled, that desire that you have, but you can only do it if you start in the present moment to break out of the old automatic assumptions that you're inputting there, that just continues to give space and energy to that old assumption in your subconscious. The first part of breaking out of that automatic impulse is pivotal. And you'll need to start to dissolve the idea that this assumption is true. You'll have to stop giving it permission and consent to be true about you. Now, this is complicated because you have a physiological experience that you went through. So as a kid, if your parent told you you were terrible, if your parent withheld love and connection unless you were good, unless you were first place, unless you got good grades, physiologically you could be scared and fear and assume that this is how all relationships work. This is how you're supposed to and have to show up in the world. But what we need from you is your current mind. Your adult mind is beautiful. It is so high functioning, and it is so much better at reasoning and understanding moments from your past when you look back to see them from a different viewpoint. Now, Neville has the idea of revision, and this is how I personally have applied it, even though the way he talks about it is a bit different. The way I see the power of revision is to look back with your adult mind and realize that in the environment that you grew up in, it didn't happen because you lacked worth or you lacked something and you weren't deserving of love. It didn't provide because it couldn't. It didn't have the emotional sophistication. It didn't have the emotional maturity and capacity, whether that was one caregiver or multiple. Whatever you didn't get a chance to experience in childhood that you needed had nothing to do with you. It had to do with the environment. But what happens as kids, as we say and we think that our caregivers are like gods, they know best, they know it all, because we can't survive on our own. So if we don't see that, oh, you know what? They were human. They did the best they could, even if that was horrible. That doesn't mean you have to forgive them and let it go and not process the pain and disappointment. But it means that that burden, whatever happened that lacked in your environment, was not your responsibility. It wasn't anything you did or didn't do. You could not have gotten what you needed because that environment could not support you in it. Allowing these ideas and realizations of yourself to be in your conscious awareness can allow you to start letting go and cutting the root system that keeps getting supplied because you're still relating to yourself through your environment. Start to learn to relate through yourself. How do you see yourself? Is that based on somebody's opinions, expectations, or judgments of you as to why you think that? Or is that genuinely how you see yourself? Learning how to break out of the automatic, I relate to myself through other people, and learning how to relate to other people through yourself is one of the biggest ways that you can change your assumptions, beginning to dissolve those old permissions and those old consents when you were too young to understand, when you didn't have the life experience to understand that experience in your life. As an adult, you have the ability to look back and no longer give permission, no longer give consent to those early on experiences, and start to upgrade them to form the concept of your true self and all of the different assumptions that you deserve to experience. Now, this will completely help you break free of those old assumptions and allow the law of assumption to work for you. But you might be doubting that you can actually do it. Now, this next video right here is going to help show you how you can change things even if you're doubting. So check that video out right here.